Hello, thank you for joining us for our third installment of Field Stories. We're here today with Josh Anadu. Josh is a senior environmental science major and honors student at Oklahoma State University. He's also a track athlete and an aficionado of the outdoors, geology, and space exploration, hence his research interest in geoscience. Josh recently published a video entitled The Hazards of Fieldwork While Black, which is circulated online and spoke to the typical occurrences of Black researchers in the field in a nation or a world rather of white supremacy. So Josh, first, thank you for being with us. You stated that what motivated you to create the video was to get white PI scientists or those doing fieldwork to understand how important it is to address racism in the field for the purposes of safety, inclusion, and just basic awareness. What conversations have you had since releasing that video, or maybe even if you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
Um, yeah. Since that video, kind of like I said in that video, I just felt like a lot of times, whether it be that situation or other situations that I've talked to people about who are other minorities, if they have kind of just made a joke like in between each other about like, oh, who knows if this place is going to be safe or blah blah blah, that kind of thing hasn't been discussed at all by the generally normally white PIs, and that's probably just a lack of not thinking about that, because it's not something that they have to worry about. It's just like general safety is all they have to think about. But since then, it's actually, I have been, if anything, flooded with people trying to reach out to me, which has been really nice. I'm actually currently writing an article for Earth and Space News, EOS, it's AGU's, American Geosciences Union's. Their like kind of public article series. So I'm hopefully going to write an article for that. I've talked to quite a few people, whether they be PIs or individuals in organizations like USGS or AGU or GSA, so pretty big organizations in the geological sciences. And then I've received quite a lot of feedback from PIs saying that they're thanking me for talking about it and putting that on their radar, and that they had plans or were already just like immediately beginning to have a talk with their departments to try and incorporate sort of new measures in their field safety.
Right. So as you spoke in the video, just the daily kind of racist microaggressions or even the macroaggressions of like confused stares about why you're part of the team, of people and their preconceived racist ideas about what a scientist should be, and sort of otherizing and how people look at Black researchers in the field. And you speak about being ignored in your position and the knowledge you have as a field worker, people only talking to or directing questions to like the white field researchers and overlooking you as a member. And that kind of general tension about having to feel nervous or hyper alert when you see folks in the area with, anti-Black bumper stickers, or just creating an environment which just people don't feel safe, and or even just having to see white power symbols while you're working. It's kind of, did you have many folks coming to you saying, me too? Because as you said, geoscience wonders why there aren't more Black students in the field. And here we have a case in point why. But I'm also wondering, it must be really frustrating. We have a lot of literature and personal testimony that this occurs. And so I'm curious about just the kind of feedback maybe you've had with other people saying that yes, me too, this is something that they've experienced. And also kind of the way that academia in general has ignored the research, the previous papers, the previous testimonies about Black field experiences.
Yeah, definitely. I really did receive quite a lot of those, probably somewhere on the odds of like 50 to 100 people saying to me that they've had some sort of issue along those lines. And what I was really concerning in a lot of cases for me, especially with people with, I received quite a few of them were from Black women who were saying that they personally, like a lot of times, felt really, really unsafe when they were in certain areas, and it was quite upsetting to hear that. But yeah, I definitely heard quite a lot of people say that they didn't feel safe, and it felt like to the people who it had happened to, or like our general communities, maybe even if it hadn't happened to someone, it was a well-known thing. But from a lot of people who were outside, who were just general academics, who I guess were largely not minorities, they seemed very, those are the people who were like, oh, I can't believe that this has happened, I can't believe this or that. But all the people who were minorities were like, oh yeah, I mean, I'm not shocked, thank you for saying it, but I'm not shocked in any way. And to me, in a lot of ways, like, um, it was often like people were saying to me, like, I can't believe this would happen or something like that. And I'm like, I mean, I can. It's not that crazy. Like, we were, my friend and I, who's also Black, who's working with us, was also, we were like having conversations about something like along these lines, like happening while we were here. And then it happened. So it wasn't like, it was probably a little bit more than I expected, but it wasn't like in my wildest, like out of my wildest dreams that something would happen. I mean, it's pretty typical. And I mean, I definitely also received like a fair amount of pushback, and um, people,
Really? Push.
people, yeah, a lot of people were telling me, which was frustrating in a lot of ways, that basically they were telling me that I don't understand, that they're trying to explain to me that's what field work is, and that happens to everyone. Like, people always get looked at when they're doing field work, this or that. And I'm like, I understand. I also do field work. I understand, like, people are going to look at you to some degree, but also you're not me and you've never experienced this. So I definitely can tell the difference. And also everyone else who was saying, yeah, I know the difference of this between this two. I mean, there was someone, I'm blanking on their name, who reached out to me, who is a park ranger, and they told me that they, on multiple, like, people who thought they were a fake park ranger, or thought, like, called the police on them when they're trying to just do their job. Um,
Is that a thing? A fake park ranger? I've never.
I've never heard of that. I don't know what they thought, that they just didn't believe that that's what their job was, or that
Yeah.
that's what their position was. And yet, even while people are saying all of these things, they're still like, I mean, it wasn't like most people were definitely like, thank you for letting me know. But there was definitely a handful of people who were coming after me, like saying that I was like either lying, or that if I wasn't lying, that nothing happened. That's what a lot of people were saying. Nothing happened, so I don't understand. And I'm like, yes, nothing happened. That's a good thing.
So it takes something to happen for an
Yeah,
order.
for someone to care. I was like really frustrated by that, because I'm like, so nothing physical, no physical like altercation happened, thankfully. And you're saying like, I feel like that shouldn't be a possibility at all. And then also, in a lot of ways, I felt like if a physical altercation had happened and I said it, people would have been like, no, that didn't happen, that's insane, blah blah blah, like that's ridiculous, that didn't happen, I need to see proof, I need to see a video of it. People were like fact checking me on every little thing that I said, and even they were not even right in what they were saying either. Like, claiming that I was in other states that were they were saying that I was in other states that used like because there was a particular thing about like 1942 being their address, and then also tattooed on a couple of their knuckles,
Mm-hmm.
and that having us believing that had something to do with the Holocaust.
It does. That's a white symbol of power. And
Yeah,
historians know that is okay.
someone told me, I was one particular person was telling me that no, that's actually, the Holocaust actually started in 1941, and there's not much online about 1942 being a white power symbol. And I was like, well, I definitely saw something. When we looked it up, I don't know, but they're like trying to nitpick at every little thing that I'm saying, and I'm like, okay, I don't understand why me seeing 1942 as their address and also on their knuckles, and also like a white power like hand symbol, was like a ginormous stretch to me, thinking that, hey, something could be really off here.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, personally, like, I'm a pretty big person, and I was like, okay, if I need to fight someone, I can fight someone. But that's not the case for everyone. And also, really, it shouldn't have to be at all. Like, I don't want to have to, I just want to do my job. Like, that was literally, like, that was the part that honestly frustrated me a lot. Like, it was bothering me and why I made the video. I, I was a little like, I was like tense after, because I was like really like kind of like hyper vigilant about that. And I was just frustrated because I was just like, I just want to do my job, and like I just can't just do my job. And that was frustrating. And then I was like, okay, I wanted to make something positive out of it, or to try my best to make something positive out of it. So I was like, okay, I feel like a lot of times people who are white don't realize that this could be an issue in a lot of areas, and they should know that, and they should talk to their students and have a plan of action, because we didn't have one. And it was like stressful in the moment to not know like what like who was going to have our back, and or this or that, like, and to try to figure out all of that stuff in the moment. It's much better to just kind of know that kind of thing in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. And also for people working, I mean, you're the, the PIs to be noticing something like white power bumper stickers, like that's something for them to, not for you. And it again, it speaks to this idea that you like people have to have a lived experience in order to educate others and make it safe for others, when that should never have to happen. I mean, that's something that's completely wildly inappropriate, that someone should have to have that trauma in order to, for that trauma, we kind of, the ways in which academics and in a larger, in almost every avenue of society, kind of require the testimonies of people going through trauma in order to kind of convince others. And even when we have the testimony, people still question it. But a lot of things that you mentioned are also part of larger problematic, foundations of fieldwork. For example, like, oh, that exists in the real world. We can't control how things happen in the real world. And oh yeah, that's just part of fieldwork. Fieldwork is difficult. And clearly, yes, I mean, working in the field is difficult, but having to be the victim of any kind of, violence or racism or any kind of discrimination or threat or worrying about it is not part of fieldwork. I mean, it should never be. And so there's a lot of gatekeeping and fear that, I mean, it sounds like you've experienced. I know we come up against this at Fieldwork Initiative day in and day out, that, I mean, this is a case in point, that people are really afraid of critiques of fieldwork and how it's done, and they will protect it to the end, that no, this is the way we do it. And it's again just that gatekeeping of that white standard research, that, that idea that the field worker is a by default of a cis white male with privilege and a family of elites and such. So yeah, it's really requires more action. What can we ask, like, what maybe has been done in the aftermath of this video in your own particular case?
Yeah. First, I would like to say, I definitely believe that, I'm sure you receive it uh, in an immensely more greater amount. Like, I have been talking to some people, Dr. Chris Jackson, who's a pretty famous Black geoscientist out of Imperial College, and he was telling me some experiences that were pretty similar, just like people refusing to listen to him, or, and I mean, if I look at obviously has a lot more people following him on social media. He's just like, under the comments of his things are just people like attacking him and doubting everything he says. And I'm like, in my head, like, why do you not want to listen to this?
Right.
Is it just because you just don't want it? You like, because we're saying that it's like keeping us out, and it's like it's keeping people out from, or wanting to stay in the field. So why would you, unless you don't want people to come in the field? But as far as things that have been done, a lot of professors have told me that they've had meetings with their departments. I spoke to, and I'm in contact with someone from the USGS who is like, they're having a kind of like um, a kind of like a sudden meeting, an important meeting between a lot of the heads in field work and associated kind of training. It was actually someone who reached out to me, was like in their training department, I believe, and they were trying to, implement new changes in how people approach field work for minorities. And that was definitely something that I really appreciated. I know there's a lot of stuff that's being pushed right now with regards to, the whole like Black Lives Matter movement, and there's a lot of other work that's kind of tied into this, or that has. I was working with the geobiology division of GSA, and they're doing a diverse faces in STEM initiative to try to highlight diverse faces in STEM. And in addition to, so there's like writing about, or people are writing about bios for people who diverse PIs, and I wanted to be one of the people who did it, and so I'm particularly writing one about a Nigerian PI, and I'm Nigerian, so, and she's a woman, and I particularly thought about asking her those kinds of things and trying to, highlight like just how resilient that she's had to be to make it in the field, because she's, like always receiving attacks, basically, just constantly, way more than like a white male counterpart would have to receive. So it's not just about like doing the science, it's also about like proving yourself 10 times above, to just so that you can be, respected and qualified in the field, and that makes it just that much harder for someone to make it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess it just seems also in a way a little bit silly in a sense that that organizations and universities kind of scramble like what we can do. It just feels like, yeah, having more people of color maybe in positions of power and PIs. I mean, that would, if the issue is that people simply have the ability to not notice, then maybe this does need to be noticed. We need more people in action that have positions of power and are able to weigh in on safety, and have the lived embodiment and experiences of these things. You said something really poignant in your video, which was a quote. I'm going to read it just so I don't misquote it. But you said, "It took only 1 week for us to encounter neo-Nazis in the field. Please take your students' lives in serious concern and listen to them when they feel off or uncertain." And again, something like at Fieldwork Initiative we encounter is that a certain sort of a measure, once it's been exposed or once we reach out to universities, is that they say, oh, okay, we just won't send the person to that area anymore, or we won't do fieldwork in that area anymore, in cases of harassment or discrimination or whatever it might be, bullying. Of course, I don't want to equate, gendered violence to racial, it's just a different example of problematic fieldwork, but, completely different. But we do see universities respond that they don't allow students after the fact to work in areas, and it's so it's sort of we're thinking that racism is a ubiquitous problem, right? We know that all across time and space, and it's very problematic for universities to imagine that it happens in some places but not other places, and so like this really privileges white researchers who have the freedom to kind of roam virtually anywhere without fear of racial violence or that kind of discomfort that you talked about in your video. While people of color seem to be more policed about, oh, they can go there if it's safe, otherwise it's a threat. Universities are always worrying about lawsuits and things over student safety. So would you say that present action is more importantly supporting and protecting researchers of color as opposed to limiting them? Because it's such an evident statement that you make that PIs and advisors simply don't listen to students' concerns, or they minimize them, and just the importance of listening over, hearing them and feeling the students feeling like they can have, the safety of speaking out and saying, I don't really feel comfortable here, without having to risk being pulled from the team or removed or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, because I've not been able to keep track with all of the people who talk to me, how things are going on in their departments, but that's something that I personally want to push, because I don't want to not go places.
Yeah.
I want to be able to do field work where I want to be able to do, where I feel comfortable doing it, as long as and I feel like everyone should have that opportunity as long as they feel comfortable. But a big thing that I'm trying to push, and that I've been talking to Dr. Jackson about, as this idea of, in your risk assessment, like typically universities have risk assessment protocols for general risk assessment protocols, and they also create risk assessment protocols for any sort of field activity, and they're required to. But yet, those risk assessment protocols, I don't know any scenario in which they involve considering any sort of racial prejudice or gender, possible gender violence that could be affecting people. And I feel like that should be something that should be added to those protocols, so that the people in charge are literally required to think about that and think about the students that they're bringing along on a trip, so that prior to, they can make the students feel, and because then at that point you can reach out to the student, often in a more comfortable scenario, by like either alone or like in a scenario where they're feeling more comfortable, and asking them like, what do you think might need to be done? Are you worried? Do you think we need to like pursue any specific safety measures, this or that, just so that student feels like they're comfortable? And that in a lot of ways could avoid, it could avoid a lot of the issues that might result because of the fact that you planned it without their input. And I think having that sort of, yes, it's proactive, and it's proactive. So is saying, oh, that student can't come, or not, it's not going to go to that place anymore, is also proactive. But this is proactive in a way that also
doesn't punish the student.
Yeah, empowers the student to continue working.
Right. Yeah. I'm thinking specifically, and again, sorry, I'm a social scientist. I'm an anthropologist. So my mind is going into what we know about social science, because there's so much research about, or there's so much, I'd say, personal testimony and articles and just stories that we know. For example, Frances Henderson, who works in women and gender studies, wrote a piece, "We Thought You Would Be White," about how, everything was all set up for the fieldwork. And then when they arrived and saw that she was a Black woman, people reacted differently. And that, I think that piece was written in the early 2000s or the late 2000s, but yet it's like these pieces are written, but yet we don't really see action and changing. And, of course it is that we need to tear down white supremacy. This is what, it's part of larger problems, not just within academia, of course, but that there's still, despite what we know, there still is this pushback. And even the idea that, we just won't let that student go there. It's never really, it's just a Band-Aid sort of solution. So are you pleased with maybe how your own university have they put, you said that there was some action, but do you feel, what do you feel about going back out into the field where you work, or continuing to do field work?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel a lot better about it, because I mean, for one, like, it's probably not the most, like, I would describe myself probably someone who's quite thick-skinned. So like, I refuse, kind of like, I'm like, okay, now people don't want me to be here, so now I have to be here, kind of idea. And that's just how I am. And that will probably push me to go into places that other people may not want to go into, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be like open for everyone. But yeah, I feel like we did have good conversations about it, and they asked us like what we thought we should continue doing, and basically it was just kind of like, okay, if a situation goes awry or we feel unsafe, we're welcome to leave that area, and like we'll radio our boss, and then just immediately like, hey, we're heading out, someone else can come and pick up the equipment. Or if it's an area that we're aware might have some issues, we wouldn't both as Black students go by ourselves together. We might go with someone else, like, since we usually go as partners anyway, but just have someone who's white there with us, so that might de-escalate any possible situation. And I felt good about that, because I'm happy to continue working, and I want to continue working. I didn't want to just like have to leave or just avoid those areas altogether, which for like in this job, honestly, it's probably the whole job. So, I'm pretty happy with where it's going, or with the initial sort of conclusion that we came to resolve the issue. And then also we've kind of had a few continued conversations about it following that event, and I definitely think that's an important thing, like as far as the just, keeping up to date with your students, and even throughout the time you're at the field, like just asking them, are you still feeling good about this? Is there anything concerning you? This and that, and just trying to make them feel as though they can be open with you if there's an issue. Because I know a lot of students, I mean, me personally, like we never said anything about any of the issues that were happening until that last thing, because it was a lot bigger and we were like not certain about what to do. And because I don't want to I don't want people to feel like I'm complaining, or like, oh, I've been tasked this job and now I'm like, hey, I don't feel like I should be here, and then someone else has to come and do it. And obviously I shouldn't feel that way. Like I shouldn't feel that way, but it's hard not to feel that way if we haven't talked about it in advance, so that I know that they have an understanding with me. And I think that that's something that's pretty important.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, for example, I mean, one of our founding members, I think she even recently tweeted about it. She uses sometimes she's one of our handlers of the social media, and she stated that she had an experience in ethnographic fieldwork where she came to the PI to explain that people were making she was overhearing racial slurs by the local community, and they said, well, maybe your job, this is part of the research, and you can be maybe the one that teaches them about how this is, you can humanize, and it as if that was something, her job to have to do that, and that she would have to endure it, and if not, she was the problem student, because they equate her speaking about this experience as her being sort of the problem. And so, but yet nothing kind of really being done, it just kind of stops there. And so do you feel that some sort of maybe anonymous reporting or some sort of larger body where students can really get emergency someone to kind of believe this, because we know that people have made concerns and that they've really just been slipped under the rug, and then the student feels like they have to push further, and this idea of talk about justice in fieldwork and academia in general, racial justice, gendered violence, and the whole 9 yards, being like inherently political, if it makes sense. So for example, we can't, we've seen many universities say like, oh, we're not going to make a statement about Black Lives Matter because we don't, it's too political, we're neutral. And so this idea that somehow equality, equity in research is inherently political if it's talking about race or class or gender or what have you. So I am glad to hear that you were happy with the outcome in your own case, but also, what do you feel larger than that might help keep researchers safe, and not just safe, but allow, not having to ever experience these things, more equitable fieldwork, and just in general, in order to, really tear down this brick by brick, these kinds of barriers and racism as it exists.
Like hinted at something like a larger body of which to report these sorts of issues with if people aren't listening to you or listening to students. And I think that that's often like my first initial thoughts, that seems like a really good idea, and that you're holding departments and professors responsible, because that's part of their job, is to literally, they're educators, and as part of their role they're also protectors of students. You're supposed to educate students, like you're trying to educate, empower, and protect them, because you're trying to create future people in that field. And if you're not listening to them, to issues that they might have, I feel like you're directly violating your job. And you should be like, it shouldn't be that just because you're the one who's in charge and the student feels like they have an issue and you feel like it's not an issue, then it's not an issue, which is probably how a lot of people feel. And that must be really frustrating, and having to press on even further is, I don't know, that's really stressful.
Exhausting.
Yeah. That must definitely be like, who am I supposed to be talking to? Where am I supposed to be going with this? Do I need, asking a student to email like a dean or like directly is a lot of work. So I feel like establishing the idea of having an anonymous sort of reporting system would be really helpful, I think. And just generally, this, yeah, I'm really, that idea that it's pretty frustrating, I would say, about like issues of equity being political or being politicized, and that to you it might be a political issue, but like to me that's just life, you know. So like you can think that that's a political issue, but that's like just Tuesday. Like it's just what I have to live through, and like just what I have to accept and try to like navigate. And those kinds of things affect people's lives and therefore affect people's research and their like affect their positions in academia. So like regardless of whether or not it's going on, obviously if it's going on in the university, then that does in fact affect the university very directly. But even if it's not, and it's like a concern of someone who's a part of the university outside of something outside, I feel like if science is a machine to drive humanity forward, then it seems like pretty I don't know if gross is the right word, but it seems very
Yeah,
wrong
right.
that that science would
Gross is a, yeah.
try to reject um, like the humanity of people. And like apart from science, we are all people. We're all people, and like our society affects us, and how society is run affects people. And to try to pretend as though science is somehow apart from that, when it never has been and never will be, um,
Yeah.
is yeah, gross. I'll say that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so problematic, this idea of this very neutral science and oh, we don't get involved in these other, larger happenings because we're science. And of course we know that, yeah, for, science and all of its avenues has been usurped by usually, yeah, white males of the elites, right? This is the history of how science is built, and they're very susceptible. And we see scientific racism in all kinds of forms. And so people still believing that despite, well, what we know. And but also the idea that it's the labor rests on people of color, or sort of the survivors or the victims of this, sort of the ones that deal with it every day. The labor rests on their backs in order to push back against it, and even being re-traumatized when things aren't, they're ignored. And so it being still like, even the solution is another form of like labor for individuals who are usually unfunded and usually like, already overworked and such. And so this is yeah, as you stated in your video, listening to students and taking action, right? Do you feel in a sense that there is enough
Listening to students and acting on measures that they think need to be taken. Like if they think that um, something needs to be done to keep them safe, then listen to them and do that. If they think they shouldn't go back to that area, then don't have them go back to their area, or don't at all go back to that area if it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
It feels to me like it's largely an issue of a refusal to progress or to
Yeah.
change, and that it doesn't seem like it's the most challenging thing to solve.
Right. That was kind of the core of my question, I guess, earlier, was that I kind of circled around, was just this idea that maybe like white PIs are uncomfortable with confronting someone with that, that, oh, they don't want to be put in that position, and, oh, don't involve me in this, or and that it really just having to have people really be committed to action, and not just like performative sort of statements that we protect our researchers, but really going up and saying, look, sorry, this is not okay. And people being really uncomfortable with doing that and having to do that, because otherwise the labor is on the backs of people of color. And also the safety, right? Not usually, it doesn't get done, and so the safety, yeah, kind of remains of people, students feeling unsafe.
Yeah,
um, right.
I would definitely say that like I've heard this and I kind of really agree with it in a lot of ways, that a lot of societal issues associated with race won't ever change until white people are just as upset or just as willing to say something and do something about it as we have no choice but to be. like it's really easy for me to be upset about this because it happened to me, it happens to people that I know, and I know it's real. I like live it, but until until PIs are willing to say, hey, like if they're like, you know, if they know someone or like have contact or are in the area, you know, just being like have having that uncomfortable conversation with that person that like that's not okay. We're not allowing this. We don't want to associate with you. If you want to continue acting like this, you are you are negatively affecting our students' experience, and we can't have that.
Yeah.
And that is like a really strong and difficult thing to say, but really important. I think it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also kind of what was underlying that question was like, where is the anger or the outrage by others when people see it and they just kind of are uncomfortably numb to it instead of being like, oh, excuse me, this is completely unacceptable. And then that act being seen as political, oh, we don't want to make conflict. We don't want to, make trouble or, calling out people, and especially in academia where we see they make comments or whatever it might be, their actions, and that real fear of being frozen or whatever drives folks to not do something about it. That is a huge problem, and that inactivity is the second wave of the transgression in a sense. Well, so Josh, thank you so much for being here with us, and having this conversation. We want to direct people to your video as well as your YouTube channel, Black Thoughts, which will be linked below. Did you have any final thoughts maybe you want to share with us? And again, thank you for your time.
Oh, my pleasure. I just wanted to say thank you. This is really cool, and I really think the work that you are doing is awesome. And I think that people who are scientists really should spend a lot more time reading and thinking about um, social science and the way that our society affects other people and the way that it affects the work that we do, because that's really important. And that really having that lack of a framework for understanding the way that people experience things that you think are neutral differently can really, really change how you react and feel when they talk about it or what you're willing to do on behalf of them. And I think that's really important. And I appreciate that you guys are trying to do that.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I mean, for just your time, of course. We want to link people to your video, and please share the content with, we're talking to viewers now, share the content with your university departments, because of course you undertook the time and labor to make this content, and also to be with us here today and to speak about it. So, this message is too important to be overlooked in a sense. So please make sure the video reaches far and wide and conveys that message again, which will be linked below for the viewers. Thank you again for watching. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Josh as well as to offer your support. And if anyone is experiencing any form of discrimination in the field, we also offer ourselves as a resource that we will offer immediate intervention and also support you in any decisions you want to make. And we hope your university will follow suit in that. So Josh, thanks so much again. And please don't hesitate to let us and everyone know of any way we can offer support and make sure more action is put in place.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.